Today's program is part of the Profiles in Literature series featuring interviews with persons prominent in American literature for children. The moderator for this series is Dr. Jaqueline Shachter of Temple University.
Our special guest is the eminent children's author, Bette Greene. Books shown today were published by Dial Press and illustrated by Charles Lilly. Bette, there's demand across the country to know you. How can you be reached?
Well, I think the best way would probably be to go direct to write me at my office at 338 Clinton Road in Brookline, Mass. 02146.
Thank you. Joining me in welcoming you is Carolyn Field, Coordinator of Work with Children for the Free Library of Philadelphia.
Hello, Bette. We're old friends.
Long time, Carolyn.
In 1973, you received this Golden Kite Award for Summer of My German Soldier. Carolyn, what other awards has that book received?
Well, in 1973, it was named a notable children's book by the American Library Association, Outstanding Children's Book of the Year by the New York Times, and in 1974, it was one of the 5 nominees for the children's books of the National Book Awards, which is really outstanding.
Splendid, splendid. Bette, how much of Summer of My German Soldier is autobiographical?
83%.
Bette, tell me,
Yes.
were you really sent to a reformatory?
Carolyn, I got in trouble, but I stayed out of reform
Oh, you
school.
didn't have to go to that. Well, that's good. Well, what about Anton and Ruth? Are they prototypes of people that you knew?
They were people that I did know and people that I tried to recreate.
Here's a photo of you when you were 7 with your mother and younger sister Marcy, the prototype Marcia, the prototype of Sharon in Summer of My German Soldier. Where was the photo taken?
It was taken in a little town in Arkansas where I grew up, in Parkin, Arkansas.
And is Parkin the model for Jenkinsville, Arkansas, the setting of Summer of My German
Yes.
Soldier?
Have you ever been back there to see how the community reacts after the publication of the book?
You know, Thomas Swift said you can't go home again.
That's the answer. This photo shows you at age 13 in Memphis. It was taken in the period shortly after that described in Summer of My German Soldier. Were you living with your grandparents then?
No, my whole family had moved to Memphis. I think I was about 13 or 14 when that picture was taken. Note the bobby socks.
And how did the Memphis librarians welcome you when you were there a year ago?
Well, they were wonderful. I was, I guess it's everybody's dream to go back to their hometown, to be honored in one's own hometown. And however lovely it is to be treated as an honored guest in Philadelphia, and it is, there's something about one's own hometown.
Oh, special.
So that has to be a highlight. So I was there with the Memphis and Shelby Library Association, and they.
Well, that was nice. I'm glad that the librarians
Oh, they were wonderful.
took care of you. Bette, why did you feel that you had to write Summer of My German Soldier?
I think, well, I think that I think it's no more complicated than the same reason that people have a need to talk about things that were very important to them, and the same thing that impels a teenager to rush to the telephone to call their best friend about something that happened to them. I think the motivation for a storyteller is very much the same. We talk about the things that were very important to us, and it's a way of explaining life to ourselves, I suppose.
Just had to come out.
I think the best stories do.
You, I understand, did several drafts. Now, did you do a draft after it was accepted by Dial, or had you sent this to other publishers before it was accepted by Dial?
It was making the rounds, and it had gone to several publishers, and Dial was the one that agreed to publish it. And I was working on a draft. They had agreed to publish, I think, the 5th draft, and I was already knee deep in the 6th draft. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, you say you went to the publishers. Did you have an agent?
I
or
did.
you
No, I did have an agent.
You did have an agent. You also worked on the screenplay, didn't you, for Summer of My German Soldier?
I was a advisor. I worked on it, but I saw all the drafts and worked in collaboration with a scriptwriter.
So there was a scriptwriter.
There was a scriptwriter, a very good one.
Do you think you have to have special skills in writing a screenplay from the
I think
book?
it's a process that's you adapt from one, to the other.
They're really different mediums.
They're different mediums, and you can be a master at one and not the other.
How much, Betty, of the sequel to Summer of My German Soldier, Morning is a Long Time Coming, is autobiographical?
78%.
85.
The true
And a half.
the true gift that Anton Riker gives Patty Bergen in Summer of My German Soldier is to tell her that she's a person of value. Did it require leaving your parental home, as shown in Morning is a Long Time Coming, for you to discover that?
I think so. I think that leaving home is a very bittersweet experience, and for all of us. And the happier we are at home, the more I suppose bitter it is, and the more unhappy we are at home, the sweeter it is. So, but in any, there's got to be both. In any, it's hard to leave home because it's still a wrench to leave home for all of us.
And did you really go all the way to Germany, to your friend's home, only to discover his mother was dead and then leave?
I did live in Europe for a while, and I was in quest of search, and I feel that what you do in a book, that is the reality, and somehow once you do the book, that is the reality of the book. I guess fiction has to be different from reality.
Okay. Okay.
Well, what did you study in Paris and in Columbia?
I think in France I was learning French. Seemed like
Basically
the logical
studying the language.
I think it seemed like the logical thing to do, since I didn't speak French when I came to France. And at Columbia, it was the only time I had studied writing. It was supposed to be a place where the best writers best place to go to learn to be a writer. So I went to Columbia, and I guess what they taught me, which was terribly valuable, is to trust your own judgment. If I did something that I liked, that would be what my peers would like. If I did something that I didn't think was good, it wasn't. So no matter how much I tried to justify something that wasn't good on the basis of, well, why not? It still wasn't any good.
You dedicate Summer of My German Soldier to your superstars, including your husband, Donald S. Greene, M.D., and you dedicate your 1975 Newbery Honor book, Philip Hall Likes Me, I Reckon Maybe, to your children, Geordie and Carla, and I quote, especially Carla, who never, not even once, asked for no allergy.
But you got it just the same.
Free.
Free.
Here is a photo of your family. How have they helped you in your writing?
I think that's kind of a hard question because it sounds like I should say that I really could not have written without them. Truth is, I probably could have written a lot faster without them. So much for honesty. When you have 2 kids and a husband, and a house and a mortgage, there are demands. I think overall, in general, it's nice to have a husband and kids, and that, you know, so in certain ways, I think it's given me a lot of security to write, and I think, but the day-to-day operation, I'm not sure I can pinpoint how they're helpful. I might have words saying that that they are a little less than helpful.
I see. That's honest.
That is honest.
It's not until page 4 of Philip Hall Likes Me, I Reckon Maybe, that you identify the Lamberts as a black family, and then you do so indirectly, describing Mama wrapping her strong, dark arms around me. And on page 6, you refer to Philip Hall's coffee-colored arm. What difficulties did you have as a white author writing about black characters?
Well, I had, there was, I had, initially, I had a problem. My publisher felt it would be better if I would just drop those 2 references out, because they said everybody knows you're white, and that you might run into difficulties, and they expected difficulties. They thought that people might feel that I was trying to write about the black experience, unquote, and who am I, a white writer, to write about the black experience? Somehow Bette is somebody I knew, and she was black, and I had to have her black. So I didn't take the advice of my publisher. And the most amazing thing happened is that when the book was published, it was sent to all of the militant black reviewers. Every periodical had a militant black reviewer. And they gave it to them to review. And nothing happened. It just, they were wonderful to it.
I'm so glad you stuck to your guns. Philip Hall Likes Me, I Reckon Maybe, makes significant feminist contributions because it answers the age-old question, can a girl show she's bright and still be popular with a male competitor? Or as you worded it, is Philip Hall #1 only 'cause I let him be, afraid he wouldn't like me if I were best? Betty and Carolyn, what other children's books deal with this important topic?
Betty, you want to? Well, I'll start off because it seems that recently we have had a number of books on the subject, and I was just thinking of one. It's not a beautifully written book, but it's on the subject of a girl. It's called Sarah Dunes, Weird Person, because she's a goalie on a hockey team that's made up of all boys, and the other goalie is the boy that she likes the best, and the problem is there. And then there's a current children's book that's just been published by a European author called Luke and Angela, which is the same thing. But see, you got in there a little ahead of these authors. But I think this is a problem, and it's going to become more of a problem today.
Well, I'm so glad you've tackled it. Especially appealing in Philip Hall Likes Me, I Reckon Maybe, and its sequel, Get On Out of Here.
Philip Hall.
Philip Hall is your humorous writing style.
Oh, your style is so different in Philip Hall and in Summer of My German Soldier. Both are perfect for the books themselves. And you've already mentioned the fact that you had to have the Lamberts black, even though Beth represents universal emotions and feelings. Now, were these children, Philip Hall and Beth, based on real children that you knew?
Yes, they were, and they were very middle-class blacks in a white, basically they were middle-class blacks, and they had certain, these were the people I was writing about, and their attitudes would be different. Had I taken out the 2 references and made them white, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have been right, because these were middle-class blacks in a southern white community.
And yet the jackets show that they're black, so that anybody picking up the book would know it. Thinking about the Philip Hall and Summer, What would you say would be your primary theme in each of the books?
Golly, Carolyn, I don't know.
You weren't thinking of that when you of a particular theme.
No, I think that this is not to answer your question because I'm not sure I can, but I think they both share a quality, and I think it's intimacy that they share. That both books have a type of intimacy, but thematically, how are they alike? Is that?
Or are they different?
Well, I think they're alike in many ways.
I think they're alike too.
What are their themes?
Struggle,
You don't
I'm
have.
not sure.
All right, you don't have to relate the two. Just independently, what would you identify as their primary
Maybe they
theme?
both need. Maybe the both of the baby, both. And I haven't really thought about this very much. And because I think writing is an emotional experience, and you're asking me to sort of intellectualize something that was basically an emotional experience. I think both Beth and Lambert and Patty Bergen both needed to be special.
They both needed
validation.
love and caring, even though they were in entirely different situations. Which books have sold the most copies? Was it Philip Hall or Summer? Because they're both so popular.
I think that Philip Hall in hardcover has sold more than Summer of My German Soldier, which
the first one, because the second one has just come out, so we don't really know.
The first Philip Hall has, I believe, sold slightly more books than Summer of My German Soldier, but they both continue to sell.
Well, I would think they would.
Yes.
You have a new publisher now.
A new publisher. New publisher.
Knopf?
Yes. Knopf. You talk good, Carolyn. That's
Knopf.
I don't know how I can pronounce it.
And one of my dearest friends works for them, so I'm sure you'll have a very happy
Sue Glazer.
time there. Sue Glazer, that's right.
May I ask you, please, your latest book, Get On Out of Here, Philip Hall, has been nominated for the Golden Sower Award by the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. I want to know, will there be other Philip Hall books?
As a matter of fact, there will be. I think there's going to be one. There's one that have been working on called "I've Already Forgotten Your Name, Mr. Philip Hall."
Oh,
and
that sounds cute.
My new publisher has suggested that I drop the "already" and make it I've forgotten your name, Mr. Philip Hall. And I says, no, it's desperately important that "already" is here. So I can see a great fight coming up in the future. Not really, but we all have different ideas. But if you're a writer, you can't easily accept anybody else's viewpoint.
Let's discuss the writing process then. As you see it, Betty, what is the universe that writers explore?
I think there's only one that a good writer has to explore. That is themselves. And while it sounds egomaniacal, and I grew up in Arkansas, in this little town in Arkansas, and I was never a scholar, and I wanted to be a writer, and I said, my God, what is it that I have to offer? I'm not exotic. I mean, I wasn't born in Tokyo or Bangladesh. What is it I know that can make any contribution? I think if we write clearly and cleanly enough about ourselves, that people all over the world can connect to it. My books have been published in the Japanese now, and they clearly think I'm exotic.
From Arkansas.
From Arkansas.
Isn't that
yes,
cute?
Isn't that sweet? So
there's hope for every one of us.
For every one of us, right. So I think that if one writes cleanly and clearly, that other people say, wow, that's how I feel about things.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
the universality.
That's exactly it.
And when writers tell us where they've been, what else should they include?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, sometimes you may feel that, I remember your saying once, that writers should tell us how they got there, because a lot of times the connections are important. And in your writing, I know you do dwell on connections. You want to comment on that?
Well, I don't think it's that important. When I was very young in Arkansas, I thought that traveling a great deal made one very wise. And then I met somebody, well, I didn't know. I had never known anyone outside of Arkansas. Then I met somebody who had been around the world. And when I was so excited to even meet somebody who had been around the world, and all they told me is where they ate.
Oh.
I see.
So
Superficial.
and that Emerson had never gone over 10 miles at one point of his life from Walden Pond. So I don't think the quest is that way. I think it's this way. I think
Yes.
it's internal and not geographically far.
That's an important point. How do you go about organizing your writing task? Do you begin with a plot outline, character delineation, or combination of both?
I think if I had to think of all these things right off, Jackie, I think I'd just say it's too complicated for me and wouldn't bother.
But characters do absorb your attention.
Yes, well, also I have a story that I want to tell, and I think it's as simple as that. And if I make it more complicated than that, I think that it overwhelms me. So
But you closely observe human beings and listen to dialogue.
I think so. I think so. I think that people have always fascinated me, and people and how they how we defeat ourselves very often.
I understand that you've written a manual for writers. What major advice do you offer?
What major advice? Well, writers, it seems to me, are the last of the cottage industry. We sit at home, we spend our energies and our time writing, and yet we're so surprised if somebody wants to publish it. We are too thrilled to ask certain things as how much are you going to pay me? How often are you going to pay me? Are you going to pay me on time? We don't ask the right questions. Publishers know this. Publishers know that authors are not too far removed than how we used to be in the not interested in this type of thing. It's built into every publisher. We are taken advantage of. We don't know how to take care of ourselves, and they consider us sort of children who should not be treated seriously about matters of this sort. Authors are not supposed to know about things, and like women in the South, it reminds me of women in the South. As I was growing up, we were taught that a real feminine woman should know her place and just cook dinner and be quiet and let the men folk do the fast thinking. And if you're a writer, this is what your publishers very often want you to believe. Just, we'll take care of everything. Don't worry.
Do you encourage multiple submissions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I encourage multiple unless you have a contract. Then, of course, it's like marriage. Then you are connected. But as a young writer who has a manuscript that they worked on and they want to send it around, to send it to one publisher and to wait 6 weeks, 6 months, a year is not unusual to one publisher on the off chance that they might buy it. Where else in industry is such a habit? I tell young writers, always multiply submit.
How can we obtain your manual?
Well, it's not published yet. It's not finished yet.
All right.
But it's called a writer's survival kit, and it's a lot of my buddies who have knowledgeable in the business, accountants, lawyers, and publishing people have made all sorts of contributions to it.
Oh, it's desperately needed.
I hope it will be a contribution.
When do you do your writing, Betty? You have a family and so forth.
When I get them out of the house, Caroline.
Yeah.
They usually leave about to school and my husband leaves for work. Everybody's out at about 7. I get up at 7 and with them, and I run around them. I go out and walk for a couple of miles, have coffee out, and come home at 10 and start to work.
Did anybody really influence you in your writing?
Lots of people. I think, sure. One was a teacher who was very important to me. in the 3rd grade. Miss Northworthy, we called her
She
Miss.
corrected your grammar?
No, she thought that I was
Punctuation?
funny. She
Oh.
she thought that I should be a comedian, and that's close enough. It's a storyteller, basically a funny storyteller. So librarians have been wonderful to me along the way. One librarian in Newton, Massachusetts, allowed me to use her library when my roof was being redone recently.
To
whenever I
do your
have
writing?
Well, gave me an office. So whenever I have troubles, I call the librarian and they tell me what to do. The National Council of Teachers of English, so they've made contributions to the encouragement and things along the way.
So that it hasn't been just one person, but a lot of people, which is good.
I think the first was my teacher, Miss Ada.
Speaks well for teachers that they can
I
do
think
something,
so.
they can influence.
I think she was also the librarian of the school, but our library was very minuscule. It was like 2 shelves of a I mean, it was very minuscule.
In one room.
Yes.
Do you have other books in mind? Now you've got your Philip Hall and you have your Summer of My German Soldier. Do you have some others that you're...
Well, I have one that's going to be published next year called Them That Glitter and Them That Don't.
Them That Glitter and Them That Don't. Now this is the same age level as Summer and Philip Hall?
It's for young adults, they tell me.
Well, that would be a little older, like Morning.
Like Morning is a long time coming.
Could you give us one sentence about it, because we're going to draw to a close?
I think it's about the need to be special. Jackie, I think, in a sentence, what is about? It's about a daughter of a gypsy and a
painter, you said.
And a painter, right.
Street paint.
A street painter paints the yellow lines in the middle of the highway.
Isn't that exciting?
I thought it was an artist.
No,
No, I can hardly wait to read it. I want to thank you very much, Bette Greene. You have the courage in your books not only to confront, but sometimes even laugh at yourself. It's a pleasure to know you.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Carolyn, Jackie, thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you.
La 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 la.